PewDiePie versus T-Series. What a battle that was. And it's that very battle that's being waged right now for the future of gaming. While Felix and T-Series were battling it out on YouTube, the real heart of all of this was the future of India, which, with a population of over 1.3 billion people, is going to represent a massive increase to the estimated 2 billion gamers worldwide. Hello and welcome to Work to Game. My name's Brian, and in today's video, we're going to be taking you on a journey through time and accounting figures. Yes, we're going to be looking at a bunch of numbers, as well as a few key dates in the past that are pointing to the future. Now, to be clear up front, this isn't about a console war. In fact, those days will soon be a fun relic of the past, something to be remembered and cherished. Because I can't promise you that you're going to like the future, but I can promise you that it's on its way. Today I invite you to join me in the year 2030 and to take a look at the future of gaming. This should be an interesting ride, and while I'm sure things can and will change, allow me to show you the future of gaming, and let's discuss. Okay, so before we actually dive into the meat of this video, let me clarify that I'm not saying console gaming is going away, specifically in the US, at least for a good long while. As long as there is a market for a local product, I'm sure there's going to be a local product. But okay, let's go ahead and dive in. It's weird to think that the best way to illustrate the future of gaming is by looking at the biggest creator on YouTube. PewDiePie and his battle with T-Series was highly documented, and Game Theory did a really good video about how it really was a battle for India and how Google, Facebook, and Microsoft are all trying to win in India because they know if they can endear a massive population and bring them into the online world, these companies are spending billions to make this happen. That for generations, the country is going to be endeared back to them, and those volumes and those dollars are going to mean big business for the next 50 to 100 years. These companies are already spending billions to make that happen, and we're going to go over those numbers here in a bit. But India is already no slouch when it comes to video games, but it pales in comparison to China, Japan, South Korea, and the United States. This is when it hit me. Back in 2012, Sony was out the gate first when it came to cloud streaming. They acquired Gaikai, the game streaming service, for $380 million. Then they used it to build out their PlayStation Now service, promising it's going to be delivered on TVs, browsers, and so much more. Then 3 years later, Sony buys out the patents and more for what remained of OnLive, and they shut it down on April 30th. 2015 was also a critical year for gaming as China lifted its ban on video games and consoles, and this allowed them to sell more in that market. It might not be widely known, but China is one of the main reasons you're probably frustrated about how games are monetized now. But that's another story for another day. China represents 1.4 billion people and accounts for over 25% of the $90 to $100 billion of annual revenue that the gaming industry brings in to date. Keeping the math simple, they account for $25 billion a year. Here's where this all comes back to PewDiePie's battle with T-Series. MatPat from Game Theory did his video and he talked about how India was really important for Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, and these three companies, which are being called digital colonists, are investing heavily. India is fastly coming online, but despite having access to some games locally, there's something bigger at play here, and that's, if you haven't guessed it already, is the cloud. Cloud gaming in the US is going to be a hard and long sale. It's going to take time because if you're like me, you grew up with gaming and consoles. It's just a natural part of the relationship. However, in these developing countries that are also geographically smaller, it's easier to build up super fast internet and turning those users into customers and also products to sell ads to. So how does Sony and Microsoft actually fit into this future? Well, like I said, there's still going to be consoles and console sales. However, in these emerging markets where owning a console, let alone buying a new one, isn't really practical, and with no connection to how things used to be run, you have the opportunity for both a low-cost, lower barrier of entry point than ever before. This all starts to make sense when you see that just this year alone, Microsoft and Sony teamed up to bring game streaming to the masses, because both of these two have a new competitor that's entering into the ring and able to leverage YouTube as well. And that's Google. Gamers are smart to be wary of Google Stadia. It's not like Google hasn't killed products before. So think of Stadia as the little train that could, as long as Google doesn't get bored of it. So here's the point. Cloud gaming isn't going to impact you, unless you're watching in India, over the next 10 years. But it's going to be something that chips away and eventually becomes a dominant player, built on the backs of emerging markets with no historical context and a high price point of entry. So how much do you think the PS5 and Xbox 4 is going to cost? How much do you think the PS6 and the Xbox 5 is going to cost? And so on. Honestly, I expect there to be a little bit of a sticker shock or a massive loss on each console sold come 2020. Cloud gaming isn't without its worries or its concerns. I get that. Ideas of ownership, security, privacy, and more are all there. But when I think of this, I look at it from my perspective, a perspective of being in a country and gaming for most of my life. It's these countries that are rapidly growing and don't suffer from the same hurdles in internet architecture. Because if India goes Xbox Green or PlayStation Blue or Google White, Orange, not sure really what to associate the color there, you can bet that there's going to be something that's game changing. Now, I promised to show my work, and I brought my dad in to help me dig through all the financials. My dad is being a longtime CFO and is an amazing accountant. Also, while these numbers don't say, this is what I'm doing, like in pure red ink, I want to present them to you here to tell you how the market reads them. And honestly, all of these numbers are really good, but they are also telling a story. Also, all of these companies do multiple things, so just keep that in mind. Plus, I do want to touch on one thing I haven't said so far in this video, and that is Nintendo. So let's dive into the numbers, and then we're going to dive into Nintendo. So as I was finishing up this video, I tweeted it out that I was going to be talking about this subject, and we got a lot of really awesome responses. And Dragon Spheres here actually hits on a really good point talking about the total sales, especially as it relates to PlayStation 4 at 92 million, Xbox at 41 million, Switch at 30 million. And that's essentially kind of what I'm getting at here. When we go look at the overall sales, PlayStation 2, 157 million, DS, 154 million. If those are the bar, if that's essentially the high point within video game console sales, and yet when we're talking about 2.5 billion gamers right now, with it only set to rise with the onboarding of India, we're talking about very small numbers of console sales to the overall. And that's where I'm kind of getting at. Like, if the cloud is something that is able to take off in these countries and we're able to get on another 500 million or more gamers, what is that going to look like for the future? But let's go ahead and dive into the financials of where these companies are investing and where they're spending their money. So there's a lot of different financials. We're going to be going over Sony, Microsoft, and Google, but I do want to point out one definition, the PE ratio here. This is a very interesting rating in which that it's basically the market average. Think of it as the stock price divided by the earnings per share. What this tells us is that the market average for growth historically since the 1920s is around 12. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. You can always go look at the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ, any of those, to kind of see what the global average is doing. What the PE ratio tells us is how are investors looking at it. If the market average is 12, that means in this case it's going to stay about the same. They predict in a year's time Sony Corporation is going to be around $58 to $60 a share based off their earnings. Now we're going to dive into their financials here. I just want to show you they're at 12.43. Microsoft is at 27.5, meaning that that is well over 12, so more than double. We could see them growing in the next year at more than double. So you could kind of expect them around $260 a share based off of their earnings, price of the stock divided by earnings per share. Then we've got Google coming in at 24.9, and obviously you see their price here is insane. That's a huge price for them. Google doing really well. Let's go look at what Sony is doing on the financial side. We're going to spend some time regarding their research development on the others, what that actually is telling us. It's telling us what they're kind of investing into their current backbone. It's not a capital expenditure. We've talked about that here on the channel. Capital meaning what money are they taking and investing, but we can see that under their cash flow sheet here. You guys also include links in the description if you guys really want to go dive into the number here. Capital expenditure, this is in yen. This is equating to roughly $3 billion a year of investments. Now, where you see the investments line right here is this is talking about basically what they're purchasing. So it looks like in 2019, for their fiscal year there, they have been purchasing something in the equivalent of $7 billion of acquisitions and investments. That's something that they're going out and acquiring other companies. We see Apple do this a lot where they buy up smaller companies rather than internally building it out themselves. But you see $3 billion up from 2.6 the year before, and then 3. So roughly they're kind of investing the same amount. Let's go take a look at Microsoft real quick and then finally Google. It's pretty nuts. So as far as research development, you can see kind of their ongoing support operational development costs are there. If we go into their cash flow sheet, we can see their capital expenditures at $13.9 billion, up from $11.6 billion, up from $8.1 billion. So Microsoft has been making a lot of capital investments. So what this also tells us right here is that in this positive field is that they've also been selling some things off. So it looks like in 2019, it looks like they have sold off, 100, or 540 million in assets, etc. 6.5 there, and so on and so forth. And then they've acquired some things, obviously in 2017 and 2016. This is essentially, well, obviously not just their cloud and their backbone. This is a lot of this investment is going into all of these things that whether we've heard of them yet currently or they'll be coming down the pipeline. They're not making money off these things yet. These are pure capital expenditures, and that is where that is going. Let's take a look at Google. And let's see here, financials right here. And so from their research development, oh man, 21.4 billion there. That's just, man, must be nice to have that kind of money. And so we're going to go here into the capital expenditures. So you can see that they've made a huge investment going from 2017 to 2018. 13.1 billion to 25.1 billion. Not all of this is Stadia, mind you, but a lot of this is essentially that investment into these other industries, into getting more people online. They're competing with Facebook in this case. They're competing with Microsoft. Like, this is a battle they want to win. I actually did bring up Facebook here just as a kind of an interesting piece of it. Facebook's actually sold something off. It looks like in 2018, but from a $13.9 billion investment, that pales in comparison to what Google's doing. And the reason, that's why I wanted to show these numbers to you guys, because they don't obviously sit here, like I said, going to point in red tape and like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what it is. But it is fascinating. They obviously have a lot of, irons in the fire. They have a lot of things that they're cooking, but I wouldn't count them out. Honestly, like I said, when it comes to Stadia, it's honestly if they get bored with it. Google has enough money, just like Nintendo, to literally do whatever they want. And that's really where it's going to be. If they get bored of it, that's where things are going to change. And so that doesn't mean they're going to win. I'm not saying that this means Google is going to be number one. Sony's not, that Sony's not going to win. Honestly, I think at the end of the day, gamers are going to have the potential to win greatly, but we have to be engaged in the market. I put out a video talking about why everybody's wrong about microtransactions. If you haven't seen it, I'd like for you to go check it out. It's very, hopefully encouraging, gives us a couple of actionable items that we can be doing to kind of help better shape the culture, better shape the voluntary spending or the involuntary spending that we're just throwing money at these companies, and thus reinforcing kind of like bad monetization strategies, right? So one of the things that we are dedicating ourselves to as an education channel is to sit here and try to help educate parents from not letting their credit cards go awry. We've already heard some really great comments for people who found those videos helpful. We're going to keep doing it because we feel that's the best way we can add value to the overall gaming culture here on the internet. So let's go ahead and talk about Nintendo now. Out of all this, Nintendo is the random factor in it all. They have the most valuable IP in the world and money to last a lifetime. But they have, since the Wii, opted out of the spending race. They even sell their consoles for a profit. Here is where it gets tricky. The Switch being a device and using the cloud to game in Japan is very interesting to me. This calls into question how it's going to relate to the global market and the future industry that's device agnostic. Now, right now, I see them testing out the waters with their subscription platform, basically their online service with NES and SNES games. But I also don't see them building out their own cloud streaming backbone. So like Sony, I see them teaming up with Microsoft or with Google. Not that you're going to see them go third party, but more than not, we're likely to see them, Sony, and more have their console offering in a cloud service structure here in the next 4 to 5 years. Or maybe not. Only time will tell. And I do thank you for coming on this journey with me. As always, I would love to know your thoughts below. And if you like this video, I would love it if you hit that like button, but no pressure. And if you don't mind sharing it out with the cloud. All hail the cloud. All hail the cloud. Oh man, the future is going to be weird. Thanks guys for watching. Hope you have a great day. This has been Brian for Work to Game, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.